Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to speak to you about a standardised approach to passing exams. Hello, I'm Dr. Susie Nyman from the Sixth Form College, Farnborough. I'm Curriculum Manager for Health and Social Care, and this is my 30th year at the Sixth Form College. I'm an OCR moderator, CPD trainer, an author, as well as an international speaker. So, when preparing your students for exams, we start off with the specifications, we then go to the textbook, we ask the students to make notes, we then ask them to make mind maps or flashcards. They then start looking at those exam questions, form study groups, and finally prepare for the exam. In the summer, I created this infographic about a standardised approach to passing exams. Here on our own curriculum area, we decided to use these key 8 topics here by discussing the study directory, decoding and modelling types of exam questions, the command verbs, OCR resources, models, quantitative question analysis, levels of response, and feedback. So on our study directory, or VLE, or virtual learning environment, we might have video guides for coursework and exams, going in more detail about exactly what is required from the specifications. We have examples of past papers and mark schemes, examiners' reports, PowerPoints related to that particular unit or learning objective, packs of information we write ourselves, curiosity articles. For example, did you know that they can 3D print a cornea at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne? Links to useful websites and resources, and the Hodder ebook. So for decoding and modelling types of exam questions, we look at different types of exam questions. We look at the command verb, 1 or 2-part questions, the plural rule, scenario, the environment, the setting, and the condition that that person may be spoken about in the exam question on the case study. So for decoding and modelling those types of questions, you might have short answers or longer response questions. Those short answers might include multiple choice, fill in the gaps, tick in the box, diagrams, or comprehension. Those longer response questions, for example, essays, may be description, analysis, evaluation, outline, justification, and assessment. It's useful to get different types of exam questions and try to get your students to practice those different types of exam questions. They could be many and more of the ones listed on the left. So for decoding and modelling types of exam questions, for example, on the Unit 2 exam paper, you might see identify or state questions with or without a list of options. Tick the correct statement, true or false, short answer questions, 2 to 3 marks. Multiple choice, open response, multiple choice situational judgment questions linked to a longer justification or a longer extended response question. 6 to 8 marks, we call those levels of response. And it's interesting to think, which type of questions do your students find most difficult? Those levels of response questions used on the Cambridge Technicals Level 3 exam papers could be ones that require a longer extended response. They're usually analyse, explain, evaluate, discuss, and compare questions. They'll require more detailed answers than identify, state, for example. Answers need to be well structured, answers organised into paragraphs, and help to produce a coherent answer. They use appropriate terminology, and that'll be evident, usually worth between 6 and 8 marks. Do your students have difficulty with some of these longer response questions? So have a think about which types of questions your students find most difficult here. For decoding and modelling, I put in some examples here of types of questions you might have. For example, identify questions. This one comes from Unit 2, June 2023. Here, you're given a list of options and you've got to tick 3 of them. The answers are on the right-hand side. You might have true or false. So this true or false question comes from Unit 4, 2024, question 1. And my students particularly find true and false questions difficult, particularly with anaerobic and aerobic respiration. So here simply, they've just got to put a T or an F. It's best for the students to put in the ones they're most familiar with first and then have more time to think about the ones they're unsure of. Here, again, gap fill questions. Quite often, the exam board will give you an example of answers there. You may use all the answers or a few of the answers provided. This comes again from Unit 4, January 2024, and here you're filling in the gaps and the answers are on the right-hand side. I haven't seen many of these, and I was quite surprised to see a sequencing question that came from Unit 3. Here are some statements about risk assessments, and then they have to sequence those in order. Dyslexic students particularly find sequencing difficult. And so it's good to write some questions on some post-it notes and answers and get them to sequence different things. Parts of the specifications, for example, that they're studying at the time. And you've got the examples there on the right-hand side with the correct sequence that they can then use that to remember the answers for future examinations. Here we have different types of questions, two-part questions. Again, from one of the anatomy papers. The stomach is part of the digestive system. Describe the action of the stomach, both mechanical and chemical digestion. When delivering the CPD training, what I notice is that the best responses are where the students have put a subheading, mechanical, and then chemical underneath. Remember the plural rule, actions, so at least 2. Second part, Sarah has symptoms of liver cirrhosis caused by drinking excessive amounts of alcohol over many years. Discuss how her condition can be monitored and the lifestyle changes she could make to prevent further damage to her liver. So again, put the subheading monitored, and again underneath lifestyle changes, and put a couple of examples in there discussing well. And you want to go up to the level 3 response there, and I'll talk about levels of response later. One type of question that students do find tricky sometimes is evaluate. Evaluate, you're giving the pros and the cons. So here, Charlie's 45 years old and has had asthma since he was a child. The following treatments have been used to help Charlie manage his symptoms. You're evaluating 2 of these treatments for managing Charlie's asthma. So, for example, you could do inhalers and you could do drugs. So a positive thing about inhalers could be portability, precise dosing. However, they do have disadvantages as well, such as technique, sensitivity, limited medication compatibility, for example. Evaluate 2 of these treatments again. The second one, you might look at drugs such as tablets, inhaled steroids. They work very well, but they can cause mild problems and more serious ones, including eye disorders and bone loss. So the exam question task board, I created this in order to help our students to sort of formally answer those exam questions. Here we have on the board the centre number, student name, student number. You're going to decode that exam question. Is it a level 1, GCSE, level 2, level 3 or A-level question? What's the subject? What's the paper number? What's the title? What is the topic and what's the task? I've had students in the past write a beautiful essay about the digestive system when it's supposed to be about the circulatory system. So this really focuses them into exactly what the examiner wants. In the green box, we've got command verb. Is it identify, name or list, describe or explain? And what does that mean? What are the key words in the question? What's the hooks you're going to use for it? Is it going to be a mnemonic? It's going to be a story, a song? Is it going to be a mind map, revision card, or a video? What is it you're going to use to remember that information? What are the key words and what are the paragraph headings? Then what sort of type of question is it going to be? Is it going to be multiple choice, short answer, tick in the box, fill in the gaps, etc.? Or is it going to be a longer response question there, a description, analysis, an outline, etc.? What my students find difficulty with is number of marks, number of lines, number of points. How long do I spend on that question? And if it is evaluate, you want the pros and the cons, the strengths and the weaknesses. And this is why I've made this board with two sides so that the students can write on the left and the right for their pros and cons. For the levels of response, is it level 1, 2 and 3? For level 1, is it basic? For level 2, is it sound? Level 3, is it in-depth? And I've got a traffic lighting system here. I don't get it. I think I understand, and I fully understand. Then finally, how am I going to answer that question? Pros and cons, point, example, explanation, relate, evidence, explain, own opinions, opinions of others, and or theory. Don't forget the SPAG. So a key thing to think about today is decoding that exam question. So when decoding that exam question, make sure the student is confident with the terminology and answers the question on the correct topic, as I said before. Make sure they know the key words. Make sure they can remember how to spell them. I had 2 students on one exam paper once. They couldn't read cirrhosis of the liver, so they actually didn't answer that question. Try using open book to first answer those exam questions if you're not sure. So one of the most important things to use are the command verbs. Many years ago, our students went up 10% in their exam by understanding the command verbs better. There is a hierarchy of these command verbs. At the bottom, you've got identify, describe, outline, explain, discuss, analyse and evaluate is right at the top. Know and understand your command verbs. They're written on my wall. They are the examiner's tools of the trade. Okay, I'm just going to show you 1 minute. I'm just going to go back here because I have laminated my command verbs there so that you can see them and the students can then use those in class for answering their exam questions, which are really useful. There may be more command verbs that appear in your exam paper, and it's the same command verbs used across all the OCR examinations. So here is the Cambridge Technical's command verbs booklet. Also, there is an OCR guide to examinations which lists out those command verbs specific to the OCR examinations, and then there's an new OCR guide to examinations, which is extremely useful. What is very useful is to then make your students familiar and staff with the OCR resources. Most centres have heard of and know where to get the exam papers, the mark schemes, examiners' reports. Sometimes they haven't seen the model answers and candidate exemplars before, so you can point that out. And also the use of Exam Builder, which is extremely useful when creating mocks and end of topic tests. So exam papers. OCR past examination papers are available, all but the most recent set of exams, on OCR Teach Cambridge website. The best way to find them is to search your qualifications, such as Level 3 Cambridge Technicals, Health and Social Care. Next, click on the subject link, followed by the quick links, assessment and question papers and mark schemes. There you'll find a series of question papers and mark schemes, including those from the most recent summer series. Obviously, it's not going to be published the day of the exam. You're going to have to wait until the examiners have marked all the papers, etc., and OCR upload those papers. So find those past exam papers on the OCR Teach website, which is new. The mark schemes are published as an aid to teachers and students to indicate the requirements of the examination. They show the basis on which marks are awarded by the examiners. It doesn't indicate the details of the discussions which took place at an examiner's meeting before marking commenced. All examiners are instructed that alternative correct answers and unexpected approaches in candidate scripts must be given marks that fairly reflect the relevant knowledge and skills demonstrated. Mark schemes should read in conjunction with the published question papers and the report in the examination. Again, find them on the OCR Teach Cambridge website. The examiner's reports are invaluable, and they're produced to offer constructive feedback on candidates' performance in the examinations. They provide useful guidance for future candidates. The reports include a general commentary on candidates' performance, identify technical aspects examined in the questions, and highlight good performance and where performance could be improved. The reports also explain in detail aspects which cause difficulty and why the difficulties arose, whether through a lack of knowledge, poor examination technique, or any other identifiable and explainable reason. Again, you can find them on the Teach Cambridge website. So for the model answers or candidate exemplars, OCR is open to a wide variety of approaches, and all responses are considered on their merits. The exemplars should not be seen as the only way to answer the questions. They've been chosen because they show how the mark scheme has been applied. Please always refer to the specification for full details of the assessment for this qualification. Centres may find it useful to read these exemplar responses alongside the appropriate assessment materials, for example, question paper, mark scheme, and examinators or moderators report. It's important to note that approaches to question setting and marking will remain consistent. At the same time, OCR review all their qualifications annually and make small adjustments to improve the performance of their assessments. OCR will let centres know if any substantive changes have been made. Find those candidate exemplars again on that OCR Teach Cambridge website. Exam Builder. Exam Builder is extremely useful, and we use this for end of topic tests. For example, listing out all the past exam questions on the heart or the kidney or the liver or on legislation, and also for writing mock papers too. So Exam Builder is the OCR free platform to allow teachers to build tests using the latest questions and help students to prepare for exams. More teachers are accessing this resource. It's very, very useful. And the benefits of Exam Builder are, number one, you can create bespoke tests in the form of a real exam paper. You can access a large database of past exam questions. You can customize tests in minutes using different filter options. Number two, assessing those learners. You can test knowledge and understanding the topics, identify gaps in the knowledge, and tailor learning plans to address gaps in that learner's knowledge. And then number three, prepare for the exam. Practice answering exam-style questions. Measure readiness for the exam. Boost confidence in examined units. So for models. At Farnborough, we have a variety of models that we use. Behind me, you can see that I have lots and lots of models here. We can make models out of Play-Doh here. I've actually made a model of the brain here out of clay. I've made models of the blood cells out of pottery. You could use Play-Doh if you like. You could show the kidney nephron using different pipe cleaners, for example. You can commercially buy models. Here we go, the model of the heart from giant microbes. Or here we've got a very nice model of the heart from 3B Scientific, model of the eye and of the brain. And on the floor here, there is a model of the heart that I've made out of a silk, and we put the words down on the silk to help students with sequencing. So here we've got the model of the heart, and we can do the structure of the heart. We can walk through that heart and the students then remember the information. We can model it using Play-Doh. We can clap the keywords. We can play the weakest link for the heart so that we're checking the spelling and the understanding. Here for the respiratory system, I have a silk on the floor the students walk through. We discuss the key terms. They place those on the silk. And for the kidney, I've actually made a kidney jigsaw out of clay, and they take it all apart and put all the pieces together, and then they can remember it. You don't have to make it out of clay. You could use funky foam or Play-Doh or card or anything that you have available in your own class. What I do is I take the diagrams and then I laminate them as A3 pass papers. Then we use board markers for the students to practice those exam questions over and over again, creating automaticity in answering those exam questions. So then when they get into the exam, they're very familiar with those diagrams and they can work out what the structure of that anatomical diagram is, and then they can work out how it functions. Something that I think is really important and centres struggle with is quantitative analysis of exam questions. I have examiners in my team and we spend a lot of time discussing quantitatively what the examiner is looking for. Also, when delivering the CPD training, I'm very aware that centres really want to know how many marks and how many points. So here I will be discussing marks, points, lines, and again, evaluating those strengths and weaknesses. So here's a question here, January 2024, question 1B. Tom has diabetes, which has caused cataracts to develop in both eyes. Discuss the effects of cataracts and possible impacts on Tom's lifestyle. So if this is again a two-part question. So 2 effects, 2 impacts, which makes 4. If you're discussing it in detail in order to move up to the level 3 response. Points, again, we've got 8 marks, so 4 marks assigned for effects and 4 marks assigned for impacts. Again, put a subheading. How many lines? You will get probably about 16 lines to write on, so depends on the size of the writing. They can work out how many lines they're going to use in their paper. Evaluate here the strengths and weaknesses. Now here we've got possible treatments for osteoporosis include load-bearing exercise, bone strengthening medication supplements and hormone therapy. Evaluate the pros and cons. One of these methods used for treating osteoporosis. So that student, do a subheading, just for example, load-bearing exercise, and then you're just going to put underneath 1 pro and 1 con. We've got level 1, 2 and 3 for levels of response. Level 1 is basic, level 2 is sound, and level 3 is in depth. So then discussing that further, A level 1 response answer involves many key trigger words and will be a basic answer. Level 2 response will be a sound answer with some structure and will contain many outlines, descriptions and explanations. A level 3 response answer will be in depth, logical and coherent, containing analysis, evaluations, comparisons and justifications. A level 3 response answer correctly uses in-depth terminology and understanding information, diagrams or data. A level 3 response answer provides strong reasons and evidence for the points made, as well as uses the pupil's own opinions of others, and is theory linked. For this slide, I'm going to discuss feedback. I'm going to discuss formative and summative feedback that we provide for our students. So for formative feedback, here are some examples of formative feedback that can be used to support learning. Verbal feedback. So this is offering immediate feedback during class discussions or activities, guiding students on how to improve their responses or approaches. You might just ask a simple question such as, what is the largest artery in the heart that provides oxygenated blood and takes the oxygenated blood from the heart to the rest of the body? Hopefully, the students will be playing the weakest link. They can get their boards out and they'll write the word aorta. They can shout it out and they'll write it down. You can then say, that's correct, that's incorrect. And if it is incorrect, you can say why. For example, the spelling is incorrect. We actually had an Ofsted inspector in this class and carried out this verbal feedback for the digestive system, and I asked the students to write down the word esophagus, and one of the dyslexic girls spelt it wrong. And bingo, the inspector was on it. And she was checking that the literacy was correct in the class, and she went round and we played the game again. I explained how to remember the word esophagus, and the girl got it right the second time. Quizzes and polls. The students love quizzes and polls. Using quick, low-stakes quizzes or polls to gauge understanding and provide instant feedback on common misconceptions. They could be using quizzes or Kahoot or a Google form there. For interactive activities, we might play Think, Pair, Share or group work where the students can receive feedback from peers and the teacher in real time. They might like to follow some self-assessment. Here, we might actually project an exam question on the whiteboard, and then the students will write down the answer on their mini whiteboard. They can then have a look at that, they can then look at that and see if they get the correct answer, and then improve the next time they answer the same question. They may do peer review. So here we're encouraging students to review each other's work and provide feedback, fostering a collaborative learning environment, which is really, really useful. If they're peer reviewing one another, they're learning from one another's mistakes and they'll get it right the next time. Here we have progress check-ins next. So regularly checking in with your students on their progress towards learning goals and offering guidance on the next step. So going around individually, finding out with those students, do you still understand that section about how the kidney nephron works? You'll always find someone that doesn't, because it's really difficult to understand. Going over it again, and maybe getting one of the students that does understand to help another one, particularly if English is a second language. For rubrics, you're providing detailed rubrics that outline expectations and criteria for success, helping students understand how to meet those learning objectives, but also rubrics for helping answer exam questions. For example, point, example, explanation, and relate. You may even provide written comments, providing specific constructive comments on assignments or tests, highlighting strengths and areas for improvement. Now I'll discuss summative feedback. Here are some examples of summative feedback for supporting students at the end of the learning process with skill acquisition and academic achievement. You might have end of a learning objective or unit tests. So tests given at the end of a unit or chapter, and the feedback typically includes scores and comments on specific areas of understanding and misunderstanding. These can be created using Exam Builder. The second one, achievement or mock tests. Tests designed to measure students' knowledge and skills in a specific area. The feedback often includes detailed analysis of performance in different sections of the test. I've put in here portfolios or coursework because Unit 14, which is about long-term physiological conditions, maps on really well with the anatomy and physiology unit. So we tend to start Unit 14 in the summer and introduce the students to specific long-term physiological conditions. And then in September, we then start on the anatomy and go back to the structure, functions, and dysfunctions. You might do final projects where you've got large assignments such as research papers, presentations, or creative projects. The feedback can include detailed comments on the quality of their work. And obviously, they may do a final project linked to their long-term physiological conditions, for example, an EPQ project, and that would really help them with a Unit 14 and a Unit 4. Here we've got standardised tests. So we've got exams like Cambridge Technical's external exams that measure student performance against a standard. The feedback is usually includes scores and percentile rankings. We've got performance assessments here with evaluations of practical skills, such as in their coursework, it might be demonstrate or a particular technique. And so that's very useful. They may have a reflective journal when they're reflecting on their work experience, and that work experience placement may be linked to the actual topic they're understanding at that particular time. So they may be, for example, doing work experience in a hospital, and that then links to the long-term physiological conditions. They might be working in a care home, and that links really well with Unit 2 on legislation, or Unit 3 on health and safety. And then they've got their final exams. Obviously, these are comprehensive tests covering all material taught during the course. The feedback might include overall scores, specific areas of strengths, and areas of needing improvement. The next slide here is about exam technique. Really important to practice those exams under timed conditions, making sure those students practice those past papers under time conditions. But also for those students that have access arrangements, what do they use that 25% extra time for? Make sure that they've practiced that and they know how they're going to use it. Are they going to go over their answers? Are they going to spend longer reading the questions? It's really important for them to know how to use that extra time. Have an essay plan. Use a specific essay plan for the longer response questions, particularly for analyse and evaluate. Analysing separates information into components and identify the characteristics, sometimes discussing the pros and cons of a topic or argument and making a reasoned judgment. Sometimes you may be analysing the cause and the effect of something as well. Analyse may be part of a two-part question. Evaluate, give an opinion by discussing the pros and the cons or the good and bad points. What's really useful is to think like an examiner. Become an expert at decoding exam questions. For a student to show you know exactly what the examiner wants. Write your own or similar exam questions. Quite often I'll go through a topic and I'll ask students to write a fill in the gaps, a tick in the box question about that topic. And it really shows good understanding if they're able to do that. Create mark schemes to your own questions and check with your teacher. Examiners don't have time. Be clear and precise with your answers. Create study groups. Students could create their own study groups and work together. Here's the maths. 2 students each working on a different topic for 30 minutes now share 1 hour's worth of information. Also, different students understand information in different ways. Students learn in different ways. And sometimes we actually get students to work together in Google Slides. They might be summarising information, for example, about health and safety. And one student might put the text in there, another puts images in there. Someone might find a useful video that they can put in there as well, and they can share that information together. So overall exam practice and overall exam technique. Exam practice, build in a variety of exam practice opportunities throughout your scheme of work, not just at the end of the unit. Develop a good exam technique, that's essential. Students will need to be supported to enable them to answer legislation, anatomy, research methods, any of those questions well and gain the most marks they can. It's useful to have end-of-topic tests. As I said, use peer marking, whole class marking a question. You might have an example of a question that has been delivered and marked through OCR CPD training. Discuss features of a good answer, looking at the mock exams where people have found difficulty with those particular topics. I know my class really don't like true and false questions. They find those very difficult. Answer different types of questions, e.g. points-based and extended response. Use past papers and exam builder. And we love to play the weakest link. And 2 weeks before they sit their examination, we get them to go through about 100 A3 laminated exam questions, particularly for the anatomy, so that they become automatic at answering those type of questions, so that they're able to spot a diagram and be able to label it very quickly. The skills required to answer exam questions I see as a crock and bush, whereby at the top, the most important is the command verb. Is it identify, name, list, describe, explain, analyse or evaluate? How many marks, how many points and how many minutes? What are those levels of response? Levels 1, 2 or 3. Level 1 is basic, 2 is sound and 3 is in-depth. How is the examiner asking you to answer that question? Is it pros and cons? Is it point, example, explanation, link? Is it opinions, your own opinions or the opinions of others, and theory? How are you going to remember that information? Paper chains, sequencing information, for example, sequencing blood flow through the heart. One centre I visited near Dartford actually made paper chains and had them all the way up the poles, all the way across the ceiling and all the way down the other side. And they said that using paper chains really helped the students to remember the information and link it together. Number of pegs, Cornell notes, or lolly sticks for showing saturated and unsaturated fats, for example. Post-it notes, really good for sequencing or putting down information about legislation. Brainstorming ideas, storyboard, digestive system, a day in the life of a cheese sandwich. You might put a plan. You might have a song. I had a student who went up from 28 to 52% by learning all the songs on YouTube about, for example, the circulatory system song. You might make a video. You might have a video that you find really useful to remember information. You might use a model. We make models out of Play-Doh, or we have commercial models, or we have models on the floor that we use for the heart or the kidney or the liver or anything. Mnemonics. We can use mnemonics to remember sequences. Dominoes, when you have the cause and the effect, and you can use those to remember information. You might have a mind map with keywords on there. You might create a revision card with the questions on the front and the answers on the back. Or you might use a story. I use a story when discussing about how a neuron fires, and students really enjoy doing that. Finally, what sort of questions are there? Short answer question, fill in the gaps, multiple choice, tick in the box, diagrams, comprehension, or longer response questions. I hope you found that really useful, and there are certain topics that will be really useful for you to use with your students to improve your candidates' achievements. I must give a special thanks to Oka Books for their kind permission to use their amazing images. Finally, the additional resources, don't forget. The book that is endorsed by OCR is the Cambridge Technical's Level 3 Health and Social Care Hodder Black Book. Other centres use the white My Revision Notes book written by Judith Adams. And you can join Dynamic Learning. Hodder have a specific Dynamic Learning account where you can get the e-books and pay for that maybe for a year. Get it through your department. And don't forget the OCR CPD training on the OCR CPD Hub. I'm going to say that again. Don't forget the OCR CPD training on the OCR CPD Hub that you can sign up to. For Susie's resources, we have my multisensory toolkit, which is based on science ideas I've used in class, and you'll find a variety of ways to help you deliver the anatomy unit there and other units too. My exam question task board shows how you break down the exam questions and how to be a grade riser. A lot of this is based on how to be a grade riser book published by Oka Books. And there are free videos that BDA has come in and filmed me in my classroom, and also Oka Books have as well. So thank you very much.